Hello, my name is Danny Jones, and I'm just going to be sketching out one of my characters for you. I got some new art supplies that I want to try out, including some new pens and some paints. So this character that I'm drawing right now, he's called Frosty the Gourdman, and he's from one of my comics. And you can read part of that comic at frostythegourdman.com. He's basically a snowman type character, except with a Halloween twist to it, made out of some pumpkins. But I thought he would be a good character to try out for the sketch here, and with the type of supplies that I want to try. Now for this comic I did, I used ink mostly, and back when I did the comic, I mostly used a Crow pen, and then I switched to a brush, like 3/4 of the way through, and I found out that the brush was actually a lot easier for me. But today I'm going to try out a brush pen, which I've actually tried out before, and it's actually one of my favorite pens that I've used, so I'm excited to show that to you today. Just get a rough outline here. Alright. So this pen I'm going to try out, it comes from Pentel, and it's a really nice pen. What's unique about it is that it is a brush tip, but unlike a lot of brush tip pens that I see advertised in the store, it's not like one of those foam tips. It's actually a real brush with synthetic bristles. And you can get a really nice variety of line with it, from really thin to really thick. And it's a whole lot quicker than dipping a brush into a well of ink. And what happens is it unscrews right here. Hopefully I won't spatter all over my drawing here that I did. But you insert an ink cartridge, and actually when you first get the pen, this tip is white because the bristles are white. But once you get the ink flowing through it, of course it turns black. So I'm just going to ink my drawing here. I actually don't work with ink all that often. If you look at my work online, you'll see a lot of it is digital. But even so, my work, the style of it, it's not really ink-centric. So I don't work with those kinds of tools a lot, but for Frosty the Gourdman, in order to get that kind of spooky look and style that I wanted, really loose style and bold lines, I experimented with ink. So it works really fast to get some really fine lines and really thick lines really quick. Now the ink that's included in this pen, maybe compared to other inks, it probably runs on the thinner side, but it runs really smoothly, and it's pretty dark. What I also really like about this pen is the ink is very waterproof, which is going to work out good because I'm going to watercolor this when I'm all done inking here. In terms of quality and the what this pen is aimed for, I think it has great applications for both pros and amateurs alike. I don't consider myself the best of inkers here, but I've seen some wonderful work done by other artists with this pen. And just with any other brush, you can kind of get even some texture going, which is hard to do when you're working with a pen. And it's so quick because you don't have to be dipping and refilling, and it flows really beautifully. It's not too much or too little. I think Pentel did a really good job with that. Now what I've also got is these pens. Like I said, you can get a whole bunch of variety of lines with the brush pen, but you need a whole lot more skill than I have, I guess. It's really a lot quicker just to get some of these really thinner lines with a pen. So I'm going to use these for the little smaller details and texture. This is very, very fine. Let's see, what's this say? 03. I don't know if that means 0.3 or if it's just a reference number, but it's a very, very thin line. Just nice for some of these details. Try to stay really loose here. Maybe get some rain going here because Frosty was born on a rainy, stormy night. And then I'm going to go back to the brush pen for just a second to fill in some deeper blacks like the base here. And get some texture going. Okay, after I've let this dry a little bit, I'm going to erase all those pencil lines. Now we just got the clean ink drawing, and I'm going to watercolor right on top of it. For these quick watercolor sketches, I like to just use this simple tool called the water brush, and it's just a paintbrush, and it has like a well on the handle. Water brush is really handy because I won't have to dip out into my my cup here as often to thin out the paint. And I'm going to use watercolor paint, and I have this set right here, also Pentel, and it has a nice variety of colors. And all I've done is squeeze these colors out onto a palette, just a little bit, because the watercolors will go pretty far. So I can kind of thin and wash out the color as I'm painting just by squeezing the handle, because it'll squeeze out some more water. I haven't used this brand of paint before, but what I'm noticing, first impressions, is these oranges are fairly bright. I've had troubles with other brands getting the yellows and the oranges to be bright. But these are working fairly well. I try to stay really loose and textural when I'm working with watercolors. It's more fun for me that way. And the style of this art lends itself to it. Now for the shadows, I'm kind of putting some light washes where the shadows are to kind of unify the color and create the shadows. In case you're wondering about the paper that I'm working on, it's Strathmore vellum, or Strathmore Bristol vellum. And Bristol is just a heavyweight paper, and the vellum just means it has a bit of texture to it. Most of the time when I'm working with watercolors, I might work with the smooth variety of Bristol, but vellum is what I had today, so that's what I'm using. All these paints are still really wet on the paper, so it's going to blend in and kind of just melt together as I'm painting here. You have to be careful when you're doing that, because a lot of times that could end up being a very muddy mess. But it works really nicely if you're trying to stay loose and blend your colors together. Just work as quickly as possible and work while the paint is still wet. Of course, with watercolors, if you get it wet after it dries, it kind of reconstitutes. So you can blend it even when it's dry with a wet brush. But I think you get a lot of nice random effects working wet and wet. One thing you might have to worry about when watercoloring over an ink drawing like this is some watercolor colors are more opaque than others and might cover up some of your inks. I'm noticing that just a tiny bit where I painted on the eyes there, but it's usually not a tremendous problem for me. I might just go over that again when I'm done painting. I'll probably just go over that again with the brush pen, where I want that really deep black. And while the watercolors, I usually work from light to dark, so as you can see, I'm getting into the bolder and darker colors here as I paint in some of these details. Another thing I like about these water brushes is the tip stays pretty intact. It's not fraying everywhere, as long as you don't abuse it or anything. Sometimes I even prefer working with this water brushes than my other more expensive brushes. Now I'm going to take a bit of white here and pull out some highlights and fix some of these stray marks. Now to get the white to be opaque enough, you have to use it pretty thick, even straight out of the tube. But it's a whole lot more accurate than using a whiteout, for example. I also like to use gouache sometimes, which is opaque watercolor. But I have the white watercolor here right handy, so I'm using that. I'm just going to go back to my ink brush pen for a second here. Pull back these blacks here in the eye because the watercolor ended up being a little bit too opaque there. But other than that, I think it's pretty much done. We'll just sign this here. Still a little wet there. Probably should have taped down this paper too, but this is just a quick sketch, so I didn't go through the trouble. But there you go, there's my sketch. Again, I was using the Pentel brush pen and the water brush and the paints, the watercolor paints, and I think it worked out pretty well. You can check out my website at DannyDraws.com, and this particular comic is FrostyTheGourdman.com, and I will see you guys later.